In today's lesson, we're going to be learning how to solve linear equations. So to solve, we have a couple steps. First thing you want to do is distribute, get rid of the parentheses, and combine like terms on each side. So you distribute, get rid of the parentheses, combine anything on the left, do the same thing on the right before you can actually kind of get started on the next step. Step 2 says, if there are any fractions, consider multiply the LCD, the least common denominator, to eliminate fractions. This is a really cool step, which I'm going to show you, that only really applies when you have fractions, but it makes the problem way easier than to deal with the fractions all the way through. Step 3, you're going to use the additive property equality to get the variables on one side of the equation and the numbers on the other side. Now we're going to use the addition or subtraction to add the opposite values here. So I know it's called the additive property of equality, but you can use add or subtract. And the additive property says if A equals B, then I'm allowed to add C to both sides. So A plus C is the same thing as B plus C. As long as I do add the same thing to both sides, then I'm okay. So if I consider adding the opposite values, then that gets rid of values on the side that I really don't want. Another smart idea is to consider labeling the two sides. One side to be variables, the other side to be numbers. When you label it, it makes it a little bit easier. The next step is to use the multiplicative property of equality to make the variable coefficient equal to 1. Again, you can use either multiplication or division. The multiplicative property says if I have A plus B, then I'm allowed to multiply C to both sides. So A times C is the same thing as B times C if A times C was already originally true. Note this doesn't work if C is equal to 0. That would negate the whole problem. And again, you're allowed to multiply both sides or really divide. Even though it's called multiplicative property, they're basically the same operation, just inverses. And step 5 says check the solution. Now this check is optional, but it will ensure a correct answer. I'm going to show you how to check on some of them. On some other problems, the check gets so cumbersome, it's not even, it is more work just to check it than it is to solve it. So we might not be checking every single one, as it is just an optional check. So for the first problem, it says distribute and combine like terms on each side as a step 1. So the first step, I have 2 times x minus 2 times 3, that's 6, plus 3 equals 9. Now, I have distributed, but I haven't combined like terms on that side. On the equals, if you want to think of it as kind of like, that's your big barrier. The left side is to the left of the equals. The right side is going to be to the right side of the equals. Sometimes I put a little line down the equals so you're remembering, okay, the left side and the right side, when you're combining like terms, can't actually add. Just the left side with left side and right side with right side. So on this left side, I have negative 6 minus 3. These can combine, so I'm getting 2x minus 3 equals 9. And now step 1 is done. I have distributed and combined like terms on the left. The right didn't really have much to do, but it's combined. Step 2, are there fractions? No fractions, so I don't have to do that step. I will show you that in a little bit. Step 3, get the variables on one side, numbers on the other by adding the opposites. In the step, it said consider labeling the two sides. So I'm going to have the x's on the left side, and I'm going to label the numbers on the right side. So if I have all of the x's on the left, who is not on the correct side? Well, the x terms are right here, and they're on the x side. That's cool. The numbers are the 9. That's cool. The only term that's not on the right side is the 3. The 3 is a number, and it's on the x side, so I want to get rid of that. The way I'm going to get rid of that is by adding its opposite. If you add to the left, the additive property says you have to then add to the right side. So I got to be equal here. So when I add to the left, I add to the right, and that gets me 2x on the left. Then minus 3 plus 3 adds to 0. And let's see, 9 plus 3, that's 12. So step 3 is done. I've got all of the variables on one side, the 2x is on one side. The numbers on the other, the 12 is the number, and that's on the other side. And now I want to do step 5. Use the multiplicative property to make the variable's coefficient equal to 1. So I want the 2 times x, I want the x to be all by itself. So to get rid of the 2, I can do its opposite. Because the 2 is being multiplied, the opposite of multiply is divide. So I'm going to divide the left by 2. If I had divide the left, I also then have to divide the right by 2. And then I get x is equal to 6. That is my answer. Now I told you step 5 is to check. I'm going to show you how to check, although it's optional. I'm not requiring you to do this, but I want you to know at least how to do it. What I do is I take the entire typeset problem. 2 times x minus 3 plus 3 is supposedly equal to 9, and I'm going to substitute in what I think x is. I think x is 6. I just solved, and I think that's what my answer is. I'm checking to make sure it works, so anytime I see x, I'm going to plug in a 6. Now I put a question mark over the equal sign because I don't know if the left equals the right just yet. I'm going to have to work on that. So to evaluate each side, I have 2 times 6 minus 3, that's 3. That's 6. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 3, guess what? 6 plus 3 does equal 9. Did my answer x equals 6 make sense, and did it check? Yes, it did. So I'm going to keep it. If this didn't work, 6 plus 3, let's say it wasn't equal to 9, then I'd have to go back and find my mistake. I'm just trying to find if I made a mistake or not. Let's try another problem. First step is distribute and combine like terms. So I have a distribute on the left, so I have 10x plus 15 equals 11x plus 17. There's nothing to combine on the left, or nothing to combine on the right, so step 1 is done. Step 2, there's in a fraction, so I'm going to skip it. Step 3, get the variables on one side and numbers on the other. Like I said earlier, it's best if you label, like x's on the left and numbers on the right, because if you don't label, then sometimes halfway through the problem you kind of forget what you're doing, and then you redo work that you've already done. So if I want the x's on the left, who's on the wrong side? Well, the 11x is on the wrong side. It's on the number side, and it has a variable. So I need to minus 11x to both sides. And that's going to get rid of the 11x on the right. So I have 10x minus 11x, that's negative 1x, plus 15 equals 17. Okay, so I've got my x's combined together. But now I need to get my numbers together. Who is on the wrong side? Well, x is on the right side. 15 is a number, and it's on the x side. So that 15 is on the wrong side. Because the 15 is being added, I'm going to do the opposite of add, which is minus. So I'm going to subtract 15 from both sides. The 15 minus 15 goes away. That's the additive inverse. And I'm getting negative 1x is equal to 2. I have successfully got all of the x's on the left and all the numbers on the right, and I've done step 3. Step 4, use the multiplicative property to make the variable coefficient equal to 1. So I need this negative 1x. I want that negative 1 to become just a 1. I want to get rid of that multiply. That's a multiply by x. So the opposite of multiply is divide. So I'm going to divide by negative 1, because negative 1 divided by negative 1 is 1. 2 divided by negative 1 is negative 2, and this is my answer. Now I told you I was going to check. So I take the original problem, and every time I see an x, I'm going to stick in a negative 2. The left side is supposedly equal to the right side. I'm not exactly sure. So I'm going to put a question mark on top. Then I'm going to evaluate the inside of the parentheses. So negative 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 3 is negative 1. And then 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. So the left side equals negative 5. So hopefully the right side does too. So I have 11 times negative 2, that's negative 22, plus 17. Negative 22 plus 17 is negative 5. And although I wasn't sure along the way, I am sure now, and so this checks out.